Sorry if that was repetitive. Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's presentation, What is New in TopBraid EDG 6.3. Let me start by introducing you to today's speaker. Today, we have Irene Polikoff. Irene is the CEO and co-founder here at Top Quadrant. Irene will introduce the new features and enhancements for 6.3 and provide a live demo of these new capabilities. We will then wrap up with a brief Q&A as time allows. Before we get started, let's review a few logistical items. Please feel free to ask questions as we go along by using your GoToWebinar controls. To post questions, please look on the right-hand side control panel, and you should see a drop-down box for questions. If you click on the box, you should be able to post your question at any time during today's presentation. We will address as many of these questions as time allows at the conclusion of the webinar. We will be recording today's webinar, and we'll also send a link to the recorded version as well as to the slides. With that, I'll hand it over to Irene to get us started. Irene?
Thank you, Christy. Good morning and good afternoon, depending on what time zone you're in. So let me first talk about the release at the general level in terms of what new and changed features are being introduced. A very large change in TopBraid EDG in 6.3 is this new applications for viewing and editing information, also known as Edge editors. And you will see much improved user interface and usability, many new features in them, etc. In general, you will also see some other usability-focused features that are not limited to just editors. And I will try to highlight many of them, but not all. This presentation is primarily focused on introducing these new features and cannot serve as a full overview of TopBraid EDG. I think many of the attendees are already users, and they will be looking at this to see how it impacts their upgrade plans, what's coming new, etc. If any of you are new to TopBraid EDG, then you'll see some introduction to some of its features, but it's not intended as a full overview of TopBraid EDG. It's still a useful presentation, a useful webinar, but if you want to have a fuller introduction, please get in touch with us for that. So in addition to this usability-focused features, there is also a number of new functional features. And you see a key ones listed on this slide having to do with a recurrent import of data sources, data cataloging, some additions to GraphQL APIs, reification, and so on. I will try to demo many of those features, and I will also come back to the slides to cover things that I was not been able to demo. Majority of this webinar will be through the demo. I really don't have much slides other than this title slide. And also to preempt a question that you may have as we're getting started as to when TopBraid EDG will become available, as TopBraid EDG 6.3 will become available. As some of you know, it's currently in beta, and we expect general availability release to be in the next few days, certainly sometimes next week. So very, very, very soon. With that, let me switch to TopBraid EDG and jump right in. So this is a home page, and right at the home page, I wanted to point out a new usability feature that I personally like a lot because I create a lot of asset collections. And you have this plus button right here that lets you create an asset collection from any place you are in a user interface. So you could select it right here, and you're going to go to the create page. So at least for me, that's a great improvement. This means you don't have to go in the navigator to the page displaying, let's say, all of glossaries and click new there. You could click new from any place you are. With that, I am going to jump right into ontologies. And although many of our users may not be working with ontologies directly and rather working with taxonomies or glossaries or data asset collections, dictionaries, etc., still ontologies are very key to TopBraid EDG, and we know that it's a more complex topic than some other features and topics in TopBraid EDG, and lots of focus was in this release on improving the usability to make it as easy as possible to work with and create ontologies. So I've already switched to one example ontology that I'm using, this infamous geography ontology. So you should see it on your screens. And what you see here is a number of panels. So that's somewhat similar with 6.2. You see a panel showing a list of classes, and then I've selected, and classes are showing on the right. And then below you see a panel that lists properties that are defined for this class, and also allows you to add new ones. So right off the bat, some of the new features, you have the right-click menus. So if you wanted to create a subclass, you could do it right here. You could also have access to various actions. That's something that we've been asked for quite a while. So let me use that to create a new subclass, and I'm gonna create ocean as a subclass. And with that created, you see it displayed, and then all the properties that it inherits. In order to create new properties, I could do a couple of things. I could use this panel, and the reason to do that in the panel is that then the field will be displayed on the screen is already pre-selected, because I could go here and then do something like average depth, and the property group or a section is already here. So one of the things we have done in terms of creating properties is that we try to put everything that you most likely will need, or majority of, I shouldn't say everything, but many things that you most likely need right here in the creation screen. So right here in one step, you could select cardinality, and you could select a data type. And these are the type of property definition constraints that cover probably 80% of what you need. And with that selected, you see that property appeared right here. And if you want to add additional constraints, you could do so by clicking on the edit button and adding some other constraints. Get more fields by clicking here. So all the constraints that been available before are available here. It's the point, however, is that you get a one-step kind of approach to creating properties. So let me click back on the class, and I want to highlight the fact that actually the right-click menus are available on the entries on the form directly, and instead of creating a property from this panel. I could have also created it right from here for the convenience. So I'm now creating a relationship, and I'm gonna call it based in countries. And since it's a relationship, then I am going to I'm gonna select a class as a range of values, and create it using this approach as well. So lots of flexibility and lots of usability in terms of shortcuts, etc. There's also drag and drop available, not only within the tree, but across the panels. So if I wanted to, let's say that ocean is a subclass of countries, obviously doesn't make sense, but I could just drag and drop it here. In terms of editing, you could click on the edit and on the edit button and just moving the GoToMeeting panel out of the way. And you could edit that way, or you could do the inline editing, in this fashion as well. So if I wanted to get rid of it, I could do that. So that's the ontology modeling. The user interface is arranged in panels, and as you could see, the panels can be resized. They can be moved around in any way you want to arrange it the way you want it to look. You could also introduce new panels into the user interface. They're available under this icon, and for example, I could bring in class diagrams and put it like this. So when I click around, I see the diagram, and I could switch to different types of the diagrams. So we try to put a lot of useful features for the user interface. And much of the things I'm showing here applies to all other editors as well. It's just that I started with Ontologies. Another feature that I want to show is something that is actually available in 6.2 as well, but it has been improved in 6.3. And it has to do with adding classes and property definitions into ontology. Of course, you could do the editing the way I've been doing it here, just using the user interface. If your starting point is an RDF file that's already defined in ontology, then you could load it just as you were able to do that previously. But also, often our users have as a starting point spreadsheets. So for example, they're trying to get reference data in Edge or whatever. And here is an example of the spreadsheet. As you see, there are some data and also some columns that define what this data is. So instead of trying to create a class to hold this data and all those property definitions, what we could do is import this directly from the spreadsheet, and using this import schema from spreadsheet approach. And the spreadsheet could contain multiple worksheets, each defining different class. So what's changed in 6.3 is that Edge will now introspect data, and in creating this class, it will pick the most applicable data types for the properties. So you see the class has been created through this import. You see all the properties that corresponds to columns in that spreadsheet, and you also see that the data was looked at in order to figure out that some values are integers, some are doubles, some are strings, etc. So that makes it very easy to create the model right out of data. And then, of course, if you then were using this to then stand up a data graph or reference data set, since you are using the spreadsheet and all the column names corresponds to what you have in the spreadsheet, when you're importing this data, you won't have to do any mapping. Everything will already connect automatically. Okay, with that short review of the ontology editor, let me now go to taxonomies and show you how that editor has changed and the features that and point out some features that you have there. So I'm going to switch to the geography taxonomy, and right off the bat, there is multiple layouts that are available, and layouts are arrangements of panels. So you could arrange the panels any which way you like, and then you could reset, and then you could use that layout, and then each editor also has a default layout that you could go back to, or you could go to the layout that is, you know, whatever layout is suits you best. So in fact, something that I forgot to show when I was looking at ontologies is this more simplified layout for ontologies. Sometimes we have customers for which, you know, looking at the trees with class hierarchies and then looking at the panel with properties below may be too complex of the user interface. So that's a simplified layout that's already been pre-built that is suitable for smaller ontologies. Now, what you have here is just classes, and you could click and see information about each class, and that provides kind of a cleaner view as an alternative layout for working with ontologies. Also, since I came back here, I want to show you a source code panel that is best being shown actually in the ontologies. The source code panel, as it was in 6.2, you could decide who could see it, who should not see it, and who should be able to modify data using it. But that has been improved significantly as well. You could now, if there is any nested data, it could be expanded and collapsed for better usability. The editing is syntax directed, so if you use this to edit, you could do, you know, something like this, and you have autocomplete available, etc. And so lots of useful improvements that you could have in the source code editor. All right, so now let me switch back to the taxonomies, and here you see some of the things that I've been already showing. So the right-click panels, the right-click menus are available throughout, and also the drag and drop from the tree to the form. All of that works the same way it works in the same way I showed in the ontologies. On top of the hierarchical tree panels, you have a quick search, and that's been the same quick search you've had before, and that works as autocomplete. As you could see here, you have to know the starting letters of the concept or any resource that you're looking for. Now, a new feature is that you could switch from this autocomplete mode to the full text mode, and that means that you don't have to necessarily know the starting letters. It will do a full text search. So if you know some information about the concept you're looking for, but you don't know what it starts with, you could still look it up quickly. As you see, we're seeing New York State, etc., and United States, which have this the search string at the end. What else can you do here? Well, the flexible panels mean that you could, for example, see more than one resource on the form at the same time. So you could open a resource in a new form and look at two concepts or any two assets side by side, for example, if you need to compare them, etc. As you could see, we don't have a source code panel here because users that work with taxonomies may be less likely to do that than users that work with ontologies, but you could always add this from the available panels, and as you could see, there's quite a number of panels available. Further, if you arrange the combination of panels in the way that you want this to look like, you could save it as a new layout. So you could save current layout, give it a name, and then you could decide whether it's private or whether it's shared with your colleagues, and then you could always come back to it as a useful view into data. One other feature that I want to point you to is the fact that in 6.2, let me close this out. In 6.2, we've had a lot of icons and buttons on the header of the form. And from one perspective, this is great because that gives you direct access to whatever actions you may need to do when you're editing. From another perspective, it was getting quite crowded and busy. So for 6.3, we grouped them into essentially 4 menus. You have the setting menu, and many panels have settings menu, and that will let you choose how information is displayed on the page, whether you want to see descriptions of properties, for example, or whether you want to see properties that have no values, that are empty, etc. So you could select and unselect those. So those options are under settings. And form is not the only panel that has settings, as I mentioned. There is also settings for other panels, and then there is some global settings as well. And then there's an edit button, and you could still do inline editing if you wish to, or you could use the edit to open all the fields for editing. Then some additional edit features are grouped under this modify menu, where you could do perform some other editing actions. Then under the explore menu, you have some search features such as find similar assets, ability to see common tasks, switching to visualizations, etc. And then the more menu gives you access to some other useful and relevant operations. So you see that kind of irrespective of what is being displayed, whether it's a class or whether it's a concept or a property, you see the organization of the options and menus on the form will stay the same. Okay, with that, let's take a look at some other views that or layouts that may be interesting. So in 6.2 in taxonomy editors, you have this tabular layout. In 6.3, this is available through either a search panel that you have right here, or it is available through a dedicated search layout. And as you see, right-click menus are throughout. And the difference between just using this panel, and you could also expand and see more information right here. So the difference between using this panel and using the search layout is that the search layout also gives you access to the search library or saved queries that you may have saved. So let me go to country and select countries. Now on the search panel, you'll be able to pick columns by using this icon. So that's something that was available before as well. And something like this. A new feature is that the filter on top of the table, this filter row, in 6.2 you had one filter field that were filtering all the content that's displayed in the table. In 6.3 you could filter in a more focused way and just filter based on the values in this particular column. So that gives you more flexibility in searching and filtering information. Now, similarly to how it was in 6.2, this kind of filtering works against the data that's already loaded in the table. And you may have more data than what is loaded depending on the size of this particular data set. So the actual search options are, in terms of running a query, are available under filters icon, and here you could select a field, for example here, and just look for everything broader than Africa and run search, etc. And then, as previously, this search could be saved and then saved privately for yourself or shared with colleagues. And if so, it would appear, in the search library. As you could see, I have a few searches already saved. Another change has been in the Sparkle query component, and let me switch to the Sparkle layout. So this became much more user-friendly, again, in terms of autocomplete, in terms of collapsing data entry in general, etc. But also, importantly, is that now it's integrated with the rest of the editor. So when you see results, you could immediately, click on them and they appear in the form. And if you need to make any changes, you could make them right there. If you need to bring any other panels into this view, then of course you could do it the way I was showing, by dragging and dropping them on the page. So the Sparkle library shows saved query libraries, and you could have power users defining queries that are more complex with what is possible with search, although search is already quite capable. And then the rest of the users can run them as needed. Here I have a query saved that essentially gets me everything that has a preferred label in English but doesn't have a preferred label in Russian. So it's kind of a translation report, concepts that require translation into another language, and then you could click on it and do this translation right here. All right. With that, let me show you. Let me switch to this layout and show you. I'll show you another panel that will be useful in terms of introducing a useful feature, and that has to do with asset lists. So you may have noticed as I was right-clicking that there is a way to add to an asset list. And what asset lists do is they let you build basically list of favorites or list of things that you want to work with, or you want to share with colleagues. Those lists are saved on the server, so you could share this asset list. You could give it a name, and etc. And this way, you could come back to it, but you could also point your colleagues to it. For example, maybe there is a set of concepts that you want them to review or add definitions to, or whatever. You could then save them and share. In some way, it is similar to the basket that still exists here, and you could still add items to the basket. But the basket is just for yourself, for the current user. This is shared. Also, a basket is just one basket. Here, you could build multiple lists, multiple named lists for various reasons and purposes. Also, if the taxonomy or any other data set you're looking at is participating in crosswalks, there is a panel that will show you available crosswalks and give you quick access to them. I am focusing on some editors. I will not be able to go through an editor for every asset collection type, but they all are changing. So there is a new editor for crosswalks, a new editor for content tag sets, the new quote-unquote general editor that is tabular in its nature, and that's used for reference data sets, data graphs, data dictionaries, technical asset collections, and so on. And that general editor I will show quickly, but others I just don't have enough time during this webinar to go over. So while I am here, one of the features that I want to show is ability to state additional facts about your fact. Technically, this is called reification. And so here, for example, if I want to talk about capital of this country, I could say what dates it became a capital, and effective end and effective start. So this easy ability to add those additional facts, annotate your statements with additional facts is something new in 6.3. Exactly what fields are available for this annotation is defined in the ontologies. So someplace in the ontology, I said that this capital information should be annotatable with additional facts, and those additional facts are effective end and effective start. So this is determined in ontology, and you could have different available facts for different properties, and you could decide which properties should be annotated and which properties should not be annotated. So that's a feature that we've been asked about quite some time, and we are pleased about being able to offer it in 6.3, because many of our customers want to state provenance information, effectivity information, and things of that nature. Another feature that we have been asked about is versioning of multiple asset collections at the same time. And that's also something new in 6.3. And the way it works, you could put multiple asset collections into the basket, and then you could select them, and you'd have a create new version operation. And that operation will ask you for the version number, and it will clone all the selected asset collections, and if they have any includes, it could optionally clone those includes as well. This way you could cut a version, without going one by one, and have a more of a group operation. So let me switch from here, and I think at this point I want to go into and show you another example of a different editor with data asset collections, Northwind, so you have an idea of how it looks like. And this general, quote-unquote, general editors that are used for many different asset collection types, which is basically this tabular view and then a form. They probably look most similar to what we had in 6.2, because there was also a table and a form. But then, of course, all the features in terms of layouts, panels, etc., are available here as well. The right click, the drag and drop, all of that available. I was pointing out the filter fields, etc. So that's all part of that user interface. Nested searches, since we are focusing on the search panel, nested searches are also available, and as are available, nested columns. So, for example, if the relationship that you're looking at is, if the property that you're looking at is a relationship, you could do something like this and say, column of, and then now you could select properties of the table, for example, table kind, and that will let me look up all columns that actually belong to tables that are reference data tables. So that's an example of the nested kind of a search, and similarly you could bring up nested columns as well in exactly the same fashion. Anytime you see this little this little arrow, you could look at it, and I don't have any data here, but actually that gives you information several hops away. So that's we've worked on this kind of a nested search and nested columns were available before, but they were a bit clunky to use. And I think 6.3 addresses that, and there could be any level of nesting. You could follow those relationships hops as far as you want to. Another new feature that, or rather improved feature that I probably won't have time to show is improved batch editing capabilities. So you could select multiple resources, and then you could run batch editing of them. And in 6.2, that batch editing was kind of limited. The resources had to be members of the same class. And they also have to be a fairly small group of the resources. I don't remember what was the limitation, maybe a couple of hundred. In 6.3, the batch editor is much more scalable because it no longer tries to compare all the values that are available for those resources and come up with a common set of values. Instead, it lets you, pick the fields that you want to edit, and it just focuses on those fields. And you could pick one or multiple fields and edit them. So that becomes more user-friendly and also much more scalable than what was available in 6.2. Let me show you another feature I mentioned as we were starting this webinar. I mentioned something about recurrent imports for data cataloging from JDBC. I'm not gonna run it, but I'm gonna point you to where it's available and explain how it works. So the import from JDBC, you have to specify JDBC information, and then you have a number of options in terms of including data statistics, data samples, etc. That's all of that stays the same way it is currently. Was available in 6.2. What's new is this section where you could schedule regular imports. You could just simply use a cron expression, for example, to run them weekly or monthly or as often as you need. And you also have an option for piping those results into the workflow, and a choice of the workflow templates to pipe it, or types to pipe it into. And the reason that's important is sometimes during those imports, curators will need to reconcile the results of new data. Let's say one column was deleted, another column was added, but actually it's not a delete and add, instead it's a replace. So if it is clear what the changes are, then Edge will just commit them. If the changes require some reconciliation, then there is an ability to put them into workflow associated working copy, and you could curators can then resolve them and figure out whether it's a replacement or whether it is something that is brand new. On the workflow side as well, you'll see a bit of changes. So I already have a workflow here. So let me just go there. And the changes twofold, or maybe threefold. First of all, you'll see some changes in diagrams. They are now automatically laid out. So if you're creating new workflow templates, you don't need to worry about information of how to lay out the diagram. This will happen automatically. And also the diagrams themselves are clickable. So in addition to making changes using the buttons here, you could make change by clicking directly on the diagram. You also have a bit more information here, information about the state, when the state was entered, and who made the state entry, etc. So that information is. And you could also focus on the state and see its meaning, or focus on the transition and see some information about that transition. So we've put more information in the diagram and make those diagrams directly clickable. And the other change with workflows is that we made it easier to run additional actions as part of the workflow, there is now this option to declare state entry actions that could perform a variety of operations. You know, they could validate data, they could run additional service, they could send an email and do various notifications. That was available prior to 6.3, but it was harder to declare and define. There is now a much easier way to do that, you know, right out of the box. And as you know, with TopBraid EDG comes one pre-built workflow template, but we're also providing some additional templates for download. Just go to the Top Quadrant's, you know, website download page, and you see additional templates there. And we've been adding some templates showing this additional features, such as, you know, an action at the state entry, for example, to kick off another workflow, or to set the version number, or to perform some other action that you may need to run. With that, let me switch back to the slides and see if there is something that I have not covered yet. Okay, yes, I've talked about scheduling recurrent JDBC imports. I've talked about this facts about facts. And in terms of GraphQL APIs, so the scope of GraphQL queries has been expanded, and you'll see if you go to the GraphQL, you see that you could, previously to 6.3, you could only run them on other asset collections that are not ontologies. Now you could also run them on ontologies, so you could create classes and properties, both for read and write, directly through GraphQL, you know, using the introspection. And you could also create teamwork graphs, so you have access to all the changes, workflows, etc., through the GraphQL user interface. And, you know, you could see here in the documentation the kind of information you could get, for example, about classes, so parent classes, you know, related properties, and so on. And let me go again to the PowerPoint. And so one other feature that I'm mentioning here is a concept extraction from documents. And I already described how we're trying to make it easier to create ontologies, for example, by adding this new feature to analyze the spreadsheet and give you the right data types. You could also copy property shapes from Wikidata, from Sparkle endpoints, from other classes in the ontologies. Similarly, we're trying to make it easier to build taxonomies and business glossaries and other data sets that you may need. So one neat new feature is ability to extract and import concepts from documents. You'll see that as a new type of the importer. And what happens here is that you'd be able to upload into TopBraid EDG any kind of document, and then TopBraid EDG will analyze it and determine the most frequently used terms or concepts and provide those for you for selection, and then you could decide to add them to your taxonomy, for example, seeding it, and then enrich it or build it using this approach. So with that, here's my quick tour, and I think I've ran out of majority of the hour, but we still want to take some questions. And one thing I know that Christy wanted me to mention, that we are updating various resources. We're in the process of updating documentation, updating videos. It's going to take a bit of the time to bring it all up to the level of this release. However, with this webinar, we will be providing as attachments very detailed presentations about these new features of the editors that would be useful to take a look at and serve as documentation. Christy, over to you for questions.
Okay, great, thank you, Irene. And if you haven't already submitted your question, feel free to go ahead and do so in the question box located on the right-hand side control panel. We do have a couple of questions coming in, so we'll go ahead and get started since we're getting late on the hour. Question number 1, Irene, you showed how to save a layout of panels in the UI. Can you make the new layout to be your default?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me actually show that. So yes, you could save the current layout, and then as you save it, you could say what its scope is, you know, whether it's private or shared, whether it's for all taxonomies, and you could also make it a default for yourself. So if you have some particular arrangements that you prefer, you could make it a default for yourself right here as you save it.
Great. So we'll go to the next question. How does the transition to the new UI work? Will users be able to switch between the current or old editor and the new editor once we upgrade to Edge 6.3, or is this decided during the installation?
Yes, we want to make sure that you could have a smooth transition as necessary for you, and you'll see here these 2 icons. You know, sometimes it will be 1 icon, and that gives you ability to switch between the old editor and the new editor. So this is the old editor, and then you could go back to the new editor. And the way this works is that when you install 6.3, you'll have in configuration parameters, you'll have some options about the editor applications. So by default, if you don't do anything here, both editors will be available and your users will be able to switch between them. So that's, but the new editors will be preferred. So when they click on the asset collection, they will see the new editor, but they will be able to switch to the old editor. You could also set it as prefer old editors, and then by default they always going to see the old editor, but they will be able to switch between old and new. So those 2 icons that I showed you to allowing flipping between them, they are available with either of those 2 options. And then the third option is to disable old editors. If yours is a new installation and you have not, you know, you don't have a large experience working with old editors, or if you have already experimented with new editors and you're convinced that they are the better way for you to go, then you could just disable old editors, and then those icons for switching is not available, and there's just always just new editors.
Great, thank you, Irene. Let's take another question. Is the reification available in the ontology editor?
Well, you define the reification using the ontology editor. So in the ontology editor, you select a property that should be reifiable. And technically speaking, the way it works is that you create a node shape. And in that node shape, you declare the properties that belong to this. For example, effectivity node shape, and you set effective start date, effective end date on that. And then you say that the property such as capital is reifiable by that shape. And that what tells TopBraid EDG that these are the facts that you want to add for this particular property. So ontologies are really about defining schemas. They are not about, working with instances. You could, so our advice is always to keep instances in a separate asset collection with small exceptions. And small exceptions have to do where you have maybe a very small set of controlled values, such as, days of the week, for example. And for that, you be able to enter such controlled values, but only their name and maybe a short comment, not any kind of a richer information. Now, if you are wanting to annotate information about classes themselves, so let's say, and for classes, as you saw on that form, the number of fields are really, there's a comment, there's a label, there's subclass fields, and then there's associated properties. So if you wanted to have additional metadata on the classes themselves, and I don't know, maybe not sure, maybe you want to have a preferred and alternative name for a class or whatever, then you can declare those by modifying information about the class, actually adding additional modeling elements to, let's say, our class. And at that point, you could also add annotations to that as well. How exactly you would add these additional properties to the form for classes will actually be explained in a presentation that I've mentioned that we will be providing. So that's one of the topics that is covered there.
Thank you, Irene. I think this is a good question to end on. Is there a free TopBraid Edge editor available as an entry study product?
No, there's no free TopBraid Edge editor available. If you're interested in evaluating TopBraid Edge, you could ask us for the evaluation account. We provide those on our server, so we'll set up an environment for you where you and members of your team could try it out. We are typically quite, lenient about the time that you'll get for this evaluation. So definitely at least a month, and often this could be longer than a month. So you could explore that. And with TopBraid Composer Maestro Edition, there comes built-in Jetty server that allows you to develop, run scripts, etc. And that also runs a demo version of TopBraid Edge for the testing purposes, not for the real use, but for the testing purposes. So there is definitely ways for you to get experience and try out Edge without paying for it right away.
And Irene, just as a last note, if you can just go back to slide 9 so that people can just be reminded that there are slide sets on the new taxonomy and ontology editors that we will be providing as resources from today's webinar. And I think that pretty much wraps up our hour, so we'll go ahead and close today's webinar. There are a couple of questions that we were not able to get to, but we will be providing answers to those questions in the form of an email response to all of the attendees, as well as to the recorded presentation and the slides that we've mentioned. So thank you so much for your participation today, and we hope everyone has a wonderful day. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.